Not so bad, thank you. Yes. Well, I think we'll see what happens with the planning consent. Depending on what happens with the planning consent, it might fall that's next week. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the West Craven Area Committee. Before we get underway properly, there's various things that I need to run through. First of all, the meeting is being webcast live, and the requirements of the Local Government Act mean that anyone has a right to film a meeting. Subject to the chairman being happy where you stood and all that sort of thing. So if anybody else wants to film, you're very welcome. However, anybody that's a member of the public can ask not to be filmed, and if any of the people who are down to speak wish not to be filmed, just say so and we'll sort you out. I have kept a chair free at the big... Hi Gary, come on in. Don't sit on that chair there, so you can sit there, you're alright. The chair at the front is the hot seat. So anybody that is addressing the committee, if they'd like to come down there, you can sit or stand, but if you sit there, you're out of view of the webcast and you're not trying.
You are.
But your words will be picked up by the microphones. There's also an issue.
Sorry.
It's okay. There's also an issue with the microphones will pick up noise behind as well.
So if you sat directly behind it, you've got to have your phone on silent.
I'm just going to do that.
Yeah, so just beware if you're making any quiet comments to each other that aren't for general public, that you may be picked up by the microphones, in which case it will be broadcast to the world for all posterity. Speaking of speaking, the council has various rules about who's allowed to speak, and in terms of the items that we've got on the agenda tonight, I have got various speakers down on each one of the 2 plan applications. I'm going to see if those people are now here present. In terms of the land at Bailey Street, I've got Gary Parkinson, who's just come in, and I've got Annette Brown, who I thought I saw earlier on.
I think she's running a little bit late, I think.
Okay, we'll see how we are with that. And then for the residential development at the northeast of Meadow Way, I've got Matthew Mortensen. Matthew. Ian Bulcock. Ian, thank you. Nigel Harris. Thank you. Sam Wellington Clark. Yeah. Jean Dart. Thank you. Gareth Allman. Thank you, Gareth. And Faye Wetherall. Thank you. We just need to explain, somebody's wet that seat at the front. So now then, John Cooper. John, did you ring committee services as required?
Thought I had.
You thought you had?
I thought I had. I'm not quite sure now.
Okay, well, we'll take it that you did, and I'll get my wrist slapped tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. Could I just check, in terms of the speakers, the 3 people who put the name down for Bailey Street, you're all speaking against? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. And I'll take that as read for Annette.
I'm here now.
Where are you?
Yeah.
Give us a wave.
The one that sat on the wet seat.
Thank you very much. It's okay. It isn't really wet. But yeah. And in terms of the land off Meadowell, off Skipton Road, Mr. Mortensen, I assume you're speaking in favour. Mm-hmm. Is there anybody else speaking in favour? No. We normally allow people up to 5 minutes each to speak. Now, because we've got such a long list of speakers, and people might be repeating themselves, I will try and cut it down a little bit. So if you have a point that you want to make, but it's already been made by somebody else, if you could refrain from just being repetitive, and then we're not spending too long on listening to the same arguments. Does that make sense? Yeah. Thank you. Having said all of that, we do have an item at the beginning of the agenda in a moment or two where people can raise issues which aren't on the agenda tonight at the beginning of the meeting. So we'll get the meeting underway. Can I first of all do introductions? My name's David Whip. I'm a councillor here in Barnoldswick, and I chair the area committee. If I go to my left, if people can introduce themselves.
My name is David Walker, Environmental Services Manager and Area Coordinator.
Good evening. My name is Neil Watson. I'm Pendle's Planning, Regulatory Services and Economic Development Manager.
And can I ask people to project? We've got Harry, who is quality control at the back. If you're not speaking loud enough, Harry, first of all, he'll put his hand up like that, and then afterwards he will shout out. He will say, "I can't hear you." So you do need to project.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Chair. Gary Wilson, Kelbrook and Suff Parish Council.
Ken Hartley, Van Oswald Councillor.
Jane Mills, Balnolwick Councillor.
Marjorie Adams, Pendle Councillor for Cotswold.
Tom Witt, Barlett Councillor.
Jennifer Purcell, Craven Ward Councillor.
Peter Hampson, representing Earby Town Council.
Colin Carter, Earby Ward Councillor.
Mike Goldthorpe, Earby Ward.
Rosemary Carroll, Earby Ward Councillor.
Joanne Eccles, a Committee Administrator at Pendle Council.
Thank you very much for that. Now, you'll have noticed that there are a couple of representatives around the table who have introduced themselves as being from a town or parish council. They have all the rights of moving and seconding proposals. However, by law, they're not allowed to vote. So when we do take any votes, they'll just have to keep their hands down. They're not able to participate in a vote. I do have apologies from Christine from Salterford Parish Council and Emma West from Bonalswick Town Council, who's working away. Are there any further apologies, please? No? Item 1 is declarations of interest. I don't have a personal prejudice, prejudicial pecuniary interest. Can't get that one out. However, for openness and transparency, in terms of the plan application at Bailey Street, I am on the board of Pearl Together. However, that's been checked out by the monitoring officer at Pendle Council, and I am not debarred from participating in the discussion or voting in any way. Are there any further declarations of interest? No. Item 2 then is public question time, and this is an opportunity for people to raise issues affecting West Craven that aren't otherwise on the agenda tonight. Are there any items for public question time? No, thank you very much. We'll pass on then to item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting. Would somebody move those as a correct record? Ken? Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Those in favour? Thank you. Thank you. Item 4 is police and community safety issues. Now, we generally have a member of the constabulary in attendance, but they've done a big drugs bust in Pendle today, not in West Craven, but it's in Colne, and the neighbourhood policing sergeant who was going to attend this evening's meeting is tied up with doing investigations in connection with that, and there's nobody else available to come. So we don't have a police representative. However, if anybody raises any issues which need passing on to the police, Joanne will make a note of those, contact at the neighbourhood policing sergeant, and we'll take it forward. We will be able to discuss the community safety issues, and we'll come on to those in a moment. Ken, you caught my eye first.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. It's basically an observation on the crime figures that we have been given. At the last meeting, Ivan Hartley, PC Ivan Hartley, did in fact confirm that we had now comparative figures for December 2019 against December 2018. At the last meeting, it was the first time that they were directly comparable under the same system of recording. so I'm assuming that January 2020 and January 2019 are under the same series. It does, you know, whilst I'm not really wanting to comment on individual lines, if I put the two sheets side by side, last month's figures and this month's figures, it seems to confirm roughly a 20% crime increase compared to last year in terms of overall crime. And if I look specifically at antisocial behaviour, then the last month's figures were 21% increase and this month's figure is 24% increase. So they're all numbers, if you like, that seem to be comparable. And whilst in no way I'm criticising the neighbourhood policing team for the 20% plus increase in crime figures, I am worried that it is in fact so significantly different, and two consecutive months that confirm that level of increase makes me a little bit worried. On that basis, can I ask that we do communicate that worry to our neighbourhood policing team, whilst thanking them for the work that they do? And as I say, I'm not in any way, shape or form making a direct comment to the neighbourhood policing team, in my opinion, that it's government policy that's forcing that increase. But I wish to record the fact that there is a visible, confirmable 20% increase in crime locally.
Thank you. Jane?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. It's a shame actually the police are not here tonight, because I've got a few issues that I did want to pose to them.
Project.
Project. Oh, sorry. Right. So today there's reports of bullying tactics by district enforcement in the Elder Car Park in Manolswick. Basically intimidating and harassing people. People are getting quite upset by this, and we're sort of concerned regarding a breach of the peace in that instance. We've also today had reports of door-to-door salesmen going around certain areas of Manolswick, being abusive to residents and things like that, so I would quite like that looking into. We've got other cases of, like, for example, flags are being stolen from, one example here is Bruce Street, that was on the 1st of February. And
Paving flags, not waving flags.
Yes.
Nothing to do with Brexit.
No. And also...
Sorry, that was a joke.
And also teenagers throwing rocks at cars, so we have got some antisocial behaviour going on around that. Just like that sort of thing.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Yes, could you pass it back? Could we have some investigation, or could we have some police to start with the speeding of traffic down Gisborne Road? They're going more than 30 mile an hour. I've had a few head-on collisions with speeding cars. People are getting fed up down in the Gisborne Road area now, and even round about the town, coming down from Manchester Road, that's just the same. Second one is the drugs. They know about it, but it's still high on my list. It's been sold about.
Thank you. Peter?
Can I just ask that we ask the police about the significant increase in the crime in the Earby area, because looking at the old crime figures, this year was 37, last year was 17, which is over 100% increase. So I'd like to know, you know, what action you're going to try and take, and why the increase has possibly happened.
Thank you very much. If there's no further comment, can I just pick up on one or two issues? In terms of door-to-door sales, committee members will be aware, in previous meetings we've talked about declaring more no cold calling areas, which we have in existence in Salterford. Because the County Council were reluctant to apply a widespread no cold calling zone. We tried to eat it in parts. So we're starting with Kelbrook and Suff, and we will be canvassing local residents to see if they're supportive of that. And if we get Kelbrook and Suff under his belt, then we'd look to extend that to other areas as well. Trading standards aren't receptive to do the whole of West Craven in one fell swoop, but I think if we, if we do it little by little, that we can do that. And certainly from what I've heard, the tactics of the people going around today are utterly unacceptable, and we really don't want people well, I was going to use the word harassing because I think it probably is harassment on the doorsteps. I think in terms of the district enforcement issues, clearly there is going to be an item on the agenda for the Policy Resources Committee on the 13th of February, I think it is, and Pendle Council will be making a decision at that meeting whether to carry on with district enforcement. They have been given notice, and it's a case of whether councillors agree with an amended modus operandi or not on that evening. I think I've made my views quite clear on previous occasions, and there's nothing that will shift me from my view that they ought to be kicked out of Pendle, but we'll have to see. In terms of speeding traffic, I was returning from the meeting that you and I were at last night, Jennifer, at Falridge, coming on New Road, past West Craven High School, 30 miles an hour, somebody behind me, 30 miles an hour. We got to where the traffic islands were, and all of a sudden, from way back where, somebody pulled out, flew past us on the wrong side of the traffic islands, and then disappeared into the distance. Going that fast, he didn't have a chance of trying to get the registration number. So, I mean, there are some people who, no matter what the speed limits are and what enforcement there is, they will just do what they will, and unfortunately, they are a danger to us all. Joanne, you've got all those down. We'll let Tim Hitchin, the Naval Policing Sergeant, know what those issues are, and he will feed back as best he can. If I've picked everything up there, is that okay? Can we move on? And we are going to go on to the planning applications now, and we have got two planning applications to consider. I've got 3 speakers on the first application, which is for the land at Bailey Street, Earby, and I think we've got a picture on the screen. My speakers are, first of all, Gary.
Annette goes first.
Sorry.
Me first.
Yeah. Neil's playing about with his...
Sorry, it's cut off the screen off. I'm just trying to get it back.
Gary, if you want to take the seat, you're very welcome. Do you want to come and sit on the seat?
I think Annette's going to go first.
I've got you down first, but that's fine. Annette, do you want to come and sit on the seat, or you can stand where the seat is?
I have to sit. I'll project as well, if that's okay.
Okay.
You'll have to translate Yorkshire though, I'm afraid.
But it's all right, you're in Yorkshire, you don't have to translate.
Okay, having been given time to review the drainage strategy for this development, I can say with certainty it's still flawed in many ways, and this is the second attempt at the strategy. Due to time restrictions though, I'll concentrate on my main areas of concern, which is the strategy for the foul and surface water. In an area known for problems with drainage, this issue shouldn't be glossed over. Firstly, I'd like to draw your attention to the connection to the existing foul sewage line that's highlighted in Appendix G. Now, I know we do have some copies if you need them, or if you remember where that line is.
I'm sure colleagues would appreciate if you
would you
had.
Would you mind handing out just the small ones at the file? Thank you. We've got A3 if you need larger ones, but there is some smaller ones. On the strategy, it highlights a sewer that goes through Aspin Grove. In the key, you know that this sewer is actually a surface water drain, not a foul sewage drain. I think that's important to point out because we know for a fact that McDermott's did not put a sewage line in Bailey Street, but they did install a SUDS system. This line, no doubt, forms part of that SUDS system. It will channel surface water through the SUDS system, which is built for the Aspin Grove development. It will channel the surface water through this SUDS system, and you'll see if you follow the surface water drain, it runs towards Aspin Grove, adjacent to the foul sewage line, never connecting to it, and then it travels down Bowhead to the direction of the New Cut Beck, where I believe that that's where the surface water is drained to. We can only conclude that there's no foul sewage connection on Bailey Street, as Paul Waite suggested in their strategy, and it would be illegal to connect raw sewage into the surface water drain as this terminates in the New Cut Beck. Moving on, I'd like to draw your attention to the surface water plan. The latest drainage scheme indicates that there may be a need to pump surface water discharge into the adjacent ditch next to Aspin Grove. This is unacceptable. Also, who is responsible for the maintenance of this ditch in years to come? The ditch has already been identified as being blocked, or that it comes to an end 4.5 metres down. Also, the volume of surface water on the site and the additional water from house gutters would be too much for this ditch to support, particularly as the plans do not show any device to limit the flow to 3 litres per second. The plan also indicates that it may be necessary to pump the foul water. As quoted in the strategy, if this is the case, then a package pump station will be required. Both these matters must be clarified before any decision is made, and an approved drawing by Yorkshire Waters should be seen. To summarise, this drainage strategy is incomplete and misleading. Importantly, to reaffirm, there is no connection to the foul sewage drain from Bailey Street as shown in the drawings. Please do not approve this application in its incomplete and unresolved state. I ask you to refuse this application.
Thank you, Annette. Could I just ask, because I have been into the various plans that have been provided by Yorkshire Water.
Mm-hmm.
So where does the foul sewage go?
The foul sewage runs down the middle of Aspin Grove. So if you notice on the A3 drawing that I sent you there, you can see, the colour version you'll see, but there's a brown line that runs down the centre of Aspin Grove that goes next to the surface water drain. So the foul water from Aspin Grove all channels down this drain, down the centre of the development. At no time does this surface water drain here connect up to that foul waste.
Yeah. I following the last meeting, I had a very close look at that, and it seems to me that the proposal is for them to connect into the foul sewer on Aspin Grove, not on Bailey Street.
They've stated it's on Bailey Street in their strategy.
Yeah.
And if you look at their drawings, you can see their connection where they've put existing foul sewage connection. That is where they're planning to connect into.
Yeah. I'm not persuaded that that's exactly the case. And certainly
looking at the drawings,
no one is going to put foul sewage into a surface water drain. And Yorkshire Water won't allow that.
Can I ask, in the plans, have you seen additional information of where they're going, of how they're going to put a sewer where they've indicated on Bailey Street,
Yeah.
because they will need to connect them houses then up to Aspin Grove,
Yeah.
and there is no plans in there to show an additional line running through.
Yeah. What I believe to be the case is that the foul sewer would run along down Bailey Street into a connection on Aspin Grove. So that's my understanding of the position.
Okay, well that's not clear in the policy, in their strategy that they've put forward. They've stated that they're looking at connecting into that surface water drain. Now, whether or not they've reconsidered that in the time that they've developed this strategy and then looked a bit more closely, who knows? But what I'm asking for you for, this is the drainage plan that was submitted, and you should be making this decision on the plan that's been submitted now, because unfortunately they're out of time.
Yeah, and I think we will be doing, and Mr. Watson will report on that in due course. Thank you. Right, Gary.
Right, looking at the drainage strategy, the flood exceedance plan for the site indicates that all exceedance water flows towards the dry stone wall that forms the boundary of the site with the existing properties on Wentcliffe Drive. This is particularly worrying for all residents on Wentcliffe Drive. The site, since the plans do not show any proposals to make improvements at this boundary, as a owner of a property on Wentcliffe Drive, this is particularly worrying. There is also an existing spring at this development, and there's obviously an existing problem within that spring, and there's no information given on the plans to rectify it. Additionally, at no point does the strategy address the water course running through the site or the rectification of the issues on the opposite side of the road, where there is a constant stream of water that can be seen over the pavement. Despite a series of efforts last summer, this problem remains, and if not corrected, will add to the problems for the new development. Finally, there is no mention of a new subsystem or where it is likely to be placed in the proposal. Any plans to utilise a subsystem configured for Aspin Grove should be categorically refused. This system was calibrated for the houses located on the estate, and it's not designed to manage the additional and large amount of foul waste from the further 12 dwellings. Previously, a subsystem solution was rejected by Paul Waits due to the initial strategy and the glacier tilt. The viability of the saltways is unlikely to be a viable method. And furthermore, it would be nice to see some plans from Yorkshire Water, if possible, and see what their stance is on it. Because there's no indication of any plans from Yorkshire Water.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions for Gary? No? Thank you very much. John, can you come and take the hot seat? No, don't fall.
Good evening, Chairman, councillors. I'll stand if that's all right.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me on. I thought I'd done it, but obviously wasn't registered. First of all, I'm here as the Vice Chairman of the Evie Residents District Association. At our last meeting, 100% of the members voted against this project. I'm going to reiterate a little bit on the drainage. I've had a meeting with Pendle Borough Council Building Control. I've been through the drawings. I am a builder. I've been through the drawings with them, and there is definitely no sewerage on that site. Where they're saying they're putting the manhole to it, which is on the application, is completely and totally wrong. So I would ask the committee to at least vote refusal on the grounds that they haven't put proper drawings in. I don't know how it works actually, the planning, but it has got a big footpath right through the middle of it. And I've noticed that Pendle Borough Council or whoever were looking at removing this footpath so that these houses could stay. Well, that footpath's been there for 60 odd years. So I don't understand how you can just go ahead and cancel that out. But there must be a way else you would be doing it. When I attended Pendle Borough Council last week, the Policy and Resources Committee, I asked for transparency with Pearl, who are doing this development. Unfortunately, I got an email today, 18 pages long. I asked them for their accounts, I asked them what kind of value they've put on, I asked them for loads of information, and they've given me a smoke and mirrors, absolutely unreal. Not one figure in pounds that I asked for. So I would strongly recommend to the councillors that, that we need to look at the benefits of Pearl and what they're actually putting back into our community. I don't think that Earby Village town will get any at all benefit from this project. And to be honest, it's the councillors, it's your job today to try and protect the residents, and the residents don't want this. So at the Pendle Borough Council, against planning permission, legal advice, they changed application for enforcement to take an extension down, and the past changed it into a application being approved, which to me was an absolutely joke. But those councillors and chairmen looked after their community, they did what the community wanted, and it got passed. So I would like, if possible, for the councillors here tonight to go and protect our community and not pass this project. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
You've got a question?
Oh.
Thank you, Chair. You said at the beginning 100% of the voters of the association.
Yes.
100%
at the
of
meeting,
how many?
there was 55 at the meeting, which is pretty fair, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Watson, can I ask you to project?
I'll try my best, Chairman. Chairman, in terms of drainage, I'm not sitting here giving expert advice because I'm not a drainage engineer, but Chairman, this has gone through quite a detailed process with objections initially and further clarification, and we have from the Pendle Borough Council drainage engineers satisfied with it, the lead local flood authority who do scrutinise these things in great detail are satisfied with it, as are Yorkshire Water. Chairman, two aspects of this. You don't have to have all the details at the point where you issue a planning consent if matters can be dealt with by a condition. So, for example, Chairman, if you accept the parameters of the discharge rates that have been put forward in the drainage strategy, you can deal with that by a condition to say you must provide details of that on-site drainage as part of a planning condition. That's in national policy. Chairman, just put the slide up there. That shows what you were saying earlier, Chairman, that the foul sewer is proposed to go down from Bailey Street onto Aspen Grove. That's what the red line is showing. So we've got a plan showing that that's the proposal going forward. Chairman, in terms of whether there are other drains capable of taking the surface, I haven't done an investigation myself. All I can say is that these plans have been looked at by the bodies that scrutinise and indeed operate these systems. Unless there's concrete evidence before you to say that they're just simply wrong, that the comments are wrong and the drains aren't there, Chairman, you can deal with this by saying put details together through a planning condition to say you have to show and demonstrate how that would work. And that's a common way of dealing with things, Chairman, and indeed inspectors will deal with that. Spring on site, that will be dealt with through the building regulations process. The footpath on site, there's another item on the agenda tonight to deal with that, should members approve it. If you don't, Chairman, I fully understand what the gentleman's saying about Pearl, but my advice to you is it's not germane to the planning merits of this application tonight. I would say this, wouldn't I, but this isn't about what the community wants or doesn't want. This is about the planning merits. Now, if they coincide with what the community wants, great, but you have to have planning reasons to make decisions. It's not a vote with the community or not, however unpopular that may or may not be. This is about what are the planning merits of this case, and please, in making your decision tonight, stick to the planning merits of it.
Thank you very much for that. I can't bring you back in, John, no. In terms of some of the comments, I'll just pick one or two. John concluded by saying there's no benefit to Earby from this development, but I think the benefit to Earby was sort of paid up front, because the decision that this land, together with Aspen Grove, should be developed was taken 20 years ago, something like that, and at the time the Earby councillors wanted to take out some land that was designated for housing, which was on Cemetery Road, and what they proposed, and which eventually was agreed, was to take the land out at Cemetery Road and to substitute this land and Aspen Grove, as is now, for it. And as a consequence of that, on Cemetery Road, the croquet club was developed, the allotments were developed, the play area was developed, and in this area, the junior football pitch was created, because it was just rough land. It was ill drained at the time. It has now got drainage and it's fenced round. And at the rec was drained, and also ultimately the changing rooms were built as well. So as a consequence of taking Cemetery Road out and putting this land in, Earby has had all that benefit, and has had it now for a good number of years. In terms of this particular piece of land, at the time that Aspen Grove was developed, it was thought that Country Holidays, if we can call them that, were wanting to expand their car park further than they did, and this land was kept to one side in the event that they wanted to do that. It's not happened, so it's come up for development. So it's not the case to say that Earby hasn't had a benefit. Earby has already had the benefits. This is part of the price of actually carrying that out. The other benefit, and it's interesting that nobody has referred to the planning permissions that have been granted for greenfield sites around Northholme, and those in part have been granted because of the housing land supplies and the fact that Pendle Council needs to demonstrate that there's a 5-year supply, and without this plot of land and others, Pendle Council cannot demonstrate that 5-year housing land supply. So what we find is that by not allowing this, which is a relatively, and I appreciate people backing onto it, won't agree with this, but this is a relatively less damaging site than the perimeter of Salterford, the perimeter of Kelbrook, the perimeter of Earby, or the perimeter of Barnoldswick. So by allowing this, we're helping to meet the housing land supply, which is quite a crucial issue. We might go into greater detail on that on the next planning application. So there is a benefit for the public of Earby because it's helping to protect other areas, perhaps up Stonybank Road or elsewhere around the periphery of Earby, which people would be even more upset about development on. So in terms of the drainage, I have looked very closely at that. I'm a layperson, I do know a little bit about it. In terms of the point Gary was raising, the plans show a new drain along that wall side up to Wentcliffe Drive, and what the investigations have shown is that the existing drain that's there is choked and blocked and is not taking water, and that's why the land is currently waterlogged, because the existing drainage isn't working. The proposal is to put a new drain in, which will then drain that land. So, and just as a by-the-by, on the opposite side of Bailey Street, there is a plan which is part of the document shown on the planning portal, which indicates that Pendle Council are intending putting a new drain on the opposite side of Bailey Street to pick up the water that you've referred to coming over the pavement. Right, I've got people frantically waving over here. I'm not sure who was first. I'm going to go for Peter. Mike, I've got you.
Yeah, just a couple of points that I'd like to raise. One is, I've raised it before, that because the development is within 20 metres of a watercourse, the said spring, it does require a flood risk assessment doing, as per other planning applications that have been within 20 metres of a watercourse in Earby. So I would suggest that is a requirement before anything can be passed on this development. The other is with my flood wardens head on, is the flow rate that's going into this channel that's going to go into New Cut. The Environment Agency's method at the moment is to try and slow water going down into New Cut, and they've done, is it Marfield Farm, where they've done action to try and slow the water going into New Cut. This appears to be speeding up the water into New Cut, where we currently have a problem with flooding lower down. So I would suggest, you know, irrelevant to the drainage scheme, which seems to have been sort of half answered, from the town council's point of view, this planning application has been flawed right from the start. The documents that have been provided, the reports that have been provided have given conflicting information. Professional bodies have missed relevant information. Also, the dates were amended because signage wasn't put up correctly within the area. You know, we had to go and reconsult many bodies again, and again I would suggest that we still need answers more definitive than what we currently have to make a decision.
Okay. Peter, can I just ask, at the moment that area is waterlogged?
It is, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
so when the rain falls, what happens to it now?
Well, it soaks in.
Oh, it's waterlogged, so how can it soak in?
Well, there's one particular area that's waterlogged, and there have been pictures where they can't even cut the grass from Pendle Council on it because of the spring that's there.
So the land is waterlogged, so therefore any water that falls on it has to run straight off.
It can soak up. I'm not an expert on...
You run straight to my property.
Yeah.
And up to the back of
and
Aston Way
there
Creek
are-
Drive as well.
Yeah, sorry, I mean the point that I was trying to draw out was that it's waterlogged now, so therefore the water falling on it runs straight off it.
Yeah, into
Yes.
our property.
Yes.
The
Yes.
box
Yes.
He's talking about.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
directly behind my house.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment.
Yeah.
The point is, the plans propose to put a drain in so
Can I
that
just
it
point
would
out,
actually
there
take
was
the
an
water
email
away.
on the planning application from Pearl
Yeah,
saying that
thank
they're
you.
not
Annette.
looking at replacing
Annette.
that pipe.
Annette, the plans show a new drain going in along the wall side
According
there.
to the emails that they submitted, they are not
Yeah.
looking.
You can see it.
So that's the existing one.
Right.
Chairman, if you would help, you're absolutely right. How this is calculated is there's a greenfield runoff rate, water gets, land gets saturated, and then water runs off. At that point, the greenfield runoff rate, which is a normal rate, is exceeded. What the government national requirements are is you calculate that greenfield runoff rate, which is roughly 1 in 30-year rainfall event. You design your schemes so that it has a 1 in 100 plus 30-year rainfall capacity. So that excess water, instead of running off in inclement weather, is contained in some kind of hydro-brake soak-away system. Now, here, soak-aways won't work. So the calculation is done, whether you agree with this or not, the calculation is done. There's a condition on here to say you must put an attenuation tank in, so that will store more water than the greenfield runoff rate and let that flow at the greenfield runoff rate. So, and this is a national thing, the requirement is to make sure that there is a betterment than existing conditions. That is why the lead local flood authority are very fastidious about making sure that calculation is right, and that is a standard that's done across appeals, across public developments, ubiquitously.
So, Neil, can I just ask?
No, Annette, I can't, I'm afraid.
I just want to know,
sorry,
like
Annette,
Harris
sorry,
said,
Annette,
there was
Annette,
no tank on that plan.
Annette, I'm afraid you've had the opportunity.
I'm
and
just
you've got
clarifying
to-
a point.
you've got to- Okay. Can I just check if members of the committee have read the update, which I don't think Peter has.
I haven't, to be honest,
No,
because any emails
because-
that come on the Tuesday
right.
I can't read.
Because the lead local flood authority have responded to the consultation very comprehensively, and as a consequence they're suggesting some conditions that should be attached to this, and as a result Mr Watson's recommendation isn't to delegate grant consent but to approve this evening, because all the information that's required is on the table. Mike, you want to come in?
Yeah, it's for Neil really. We'll see the plan here, but it doesn't say anywhere in the documentation that a connection is going to be made to the foul sewer in Aston Grove. In fact, the reverse. If you go to Paul Waite's report, section 3.2, foul water drainage, it says a separate foul water system is present in Bailey Street where a connection will be made. That plan does not categorically state that the connection is going to be made in Aston Grove. So you've got a conflict between the two. Are we absolutely certain that we have got a written response that the drainage connection will be made into Aspen Grove foul water system?
Mr Watson, can you tell us what the response of Yorkshire Water
No,
was?
this is...
No, what was the response of Yorkshire Water to the revised plan?
So no objection to that. Chairman,
That was on surface water.
Chairman,
Got it here.
Chairman, if you have any doubts about this, add in a condition to say specifically, we've got the drainage condition, add in a drainage condition that the development must be connected to the public power sewer system in accordance with details to be submitted and approved. Chairman, that it can reasonably and properly be expected that they can do that if you've any doubts about it. Chairman, I think I know it will be connected into that. If you have an issue, you can deal with that straightforwardly by an issue.
No, if we're absolutely certain that is not going to be connected anywhere but into Aspen Grove, the only question then is Aspen Grove capable of handling that extra sewerage through a system that was bespoke for them? I don't know if it is. There's some comment on it. It may not be. And if that's the case, are we not adding further problems down the line? I mean, how do we understand whether the Aspen Grove sewage system that was put in specifically for that known quantity of houses can cope with the addition of these extra 12 houses on the same system?
Mr. Watson?
That's through the operator of that system, which is Yorkshire Water. They're not objecting to that. So I haven't done the calculation myself. We have to rely on those agencies to say whether their systems can cope or whether they need augmenting, and they haven't said augmenting yet.
Rosemary?
Chairman, the countryside officer reports that plots 1 to 4 shouldn't be built on this site due to the footpath. If, and I have to agree with him, because under the law, the 12-year rule comes into play on this with footpaths, so it has been used for 12 years or more, so it is a legal footpath. And also, the section 116, the parish councils can refuse their consent to this application, and they don't even have to give a reason why. Is that correct? The first question.
Chairman, when you read the footpath officer's comments, you're to read it holistically. He goes on to say, extinguishing the alternative would have no impact. So preference is not what finally he was recommending. Chairman, whether or not another body has power of veto isn't germane to whether it's extinguishing or in terms of the planning application. That's a separate process.
That will come under the next one, which is extinguishing the footpath. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. Well, Chairman, I'm still not happy with this. I think it's flawed all the way through, and I will move that we turn it down.
Okay. What are your grounds for refusal, Rosemary?
It's the wrong place for a development. There's too many complications with it, with drainage and all the rest of it.
Okay. Is that seconded? That's moved and seconded. So, Mr. Watson, are you clear what the reasons for the refusal are?
Chairman, obviously I heard what Councillor Carroll said. Chairman, I would have to say, based on those, wrong place and too many complications, that would, a refusal on that basis would represent a risk of costs, and therefore it would stand referred to the Head of Legal Services and PNRP rules.
Right. Are there any further contributions? If not, we'll go to the vote on that. So it's been moved and seconded that we refuse because it's in the wrong place and there are drainage issues. Yeah?
A lot of complications.
A lot of complications.
Yeah.
Can I see those in favour of that, please? Show. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is there anybody against? No. So that is carried what will now happen, Mr Watson will confer with the solicitor for Pendle Council, and it's likely that the matter will be referred to Pendle Council's Central Policy and Resources Committee, and that meeting is on the 13th of February. That's a central committee. It's held at Nelson Town Hall, and the meeting begins at 7 o'clock. So if anybody wants to attend that meeting, you're very welcome to do so. The submitting request to speak are the same as here. You need to do so by 12 noon on the day of the meeting. Can I thank everybody that's spoken, and I appreciate that I couldn't let you back in, but you'll get another bite of the cherry on the 13th. I'm just going to pause the meeting for a couple of minutes to allow anybody that wants to leave to leave. If everybody wants to get a breath of fresh air or go to the loo or anything like that, and then we'll restart in 2 minutes' time with the planning application for land off Skipton Road. Thank you. Sorry, just before we adjourn, in view of the decision that's just been taken, we won't be considering the footpath diversion later on, because that was consequent on the decision on this one, so that'll have to be deferred as well. Thank you. Let you get out. So, we're going to do the swap the battery. Go here, turn right, and they're on your left-hand side. Okay, I'm not sure whether we've had 2 minutes or not, but if we can get underway. We have got a considerable number of speakers on the next item, and I will make the same plea as I did previously. If people are speaking second, third, fourth or fifth or sixth even, if you please don't repeat the comments that have already been made. And again, if I can ask people to come to the hot seat to make their comments. So, looking for the right piece of paper, I've got Matthew Mortensen to speak first. Matthew, if you want to...
Thank you.
Okay. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to speak today. The application before you is an outline planning application for residential development of up to 30 dwellings with access considered and all other matters reserved. As members will recall, previous planning applications have been considered at this site, with the most recent planning application refused in July 2018 and then dismissed at appeal by the planning inspector in January 2019. The reasons for refusal, and ultimately why the inspector dismissed the appeal, related solely on two matters. Firstly, the impact of the development on the landscape and the significant encroachment into the open countryside. And second, the impact of the development on nearby heritage assets. The proximity of the Leeds-Liverpool Canal was a key consideration of both of these factors. All other matters, such as principle of development, residential amenity, highway safety, have been deemed acceptable by the planning inspector. Our brief, therefore, for this planning application was to consider those concerns surrounding the landscape and heritage impacts and address them. This has resulted in the scheme presented to you today. Since the previous scheme, this application has significantly reduced the site area from 3.4 hectares to 1.48 hectares, and the proposed number of dwellings from 63 dwellings down to 30 dwellings. This is over a 50% reduction in the site area and number of dwellings. As part of this application, we have also presented a revised landscape strategy. This provides wide areas of landscaping to the canal and upon the northern boundary. The revised landscaping will help to mitigate the impact of the built development on the wider landscape. Indeed, in consultation response to the application, the Canal and River Trust state that they welcome these landscape provisions. By reducing the scale of the encroachment into the open countryside and ensuring it is less visually prominent by users of the nearby canal, not only do these reductions lessen the landscape impact, but they also move the development edge further away from the heritage assets, thereby reducing the impact on their setting substantially. The application has received no objections from your technical consultees, including the Highway Authority, Education Authority, Natural England, the Canal and River Trust, the Leeds Local Flood Authority, Yorkshire Water, the Council Conservation Officer and the Public Rights of Way Officer. We do note the objections raised by the Parish Council, and on the key matter of the impact of the development on the canal and its historic setting, I would highlight an important quote from your Conservation Officer, who states, "The development would largely preserve this open setting along the canal, enabling the locks, bridges and related infrastructure to continue to be experienced essentially within its existing open landscape." These comments are reflected by your Planning Officer on the landscape impacts of the development at page 36 of the report pack. It is stated that there would be no loss of the open character as the development would be located further away from the canal and would relate to the town setting rather than the landscape. The proposed development would not extend well beyond the existing edge, nor would it be a significant encroachment into the open countryside due to its reduced size and built form. Therefore, on this evidence, in this case we do believe that the concerns of the Parish Council have been overcome. I would, however, like to take this opportunity to confirm that the applicant would be willing to work proactively with the Council at the reserved matters stage to ensure development is brought forward that respects both its setting and its surroundings. I would also like to take this opportunity to highlight the public benefits associated to this scheme, which are listed on page 32 of the report pack. We believe that these benefits should be given significant weight in the balancing exercise of the decision. Overall, it is our belief that we have presented to you an application which has addressed those key issues outlined at the beginning of my speech. This is demonstrated through the support of the application from your planning officers and the technical consultees. We therefore believe that we have addressed the previous reasons for refusal and the appeal decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Can I just ask if there's any committee members that have any questions? Ken? No? Any questions over here? No. Thank you very much. Right, next I've got Ian Bulcock.
Mr Chairman, committee members, I'd like to start by reminding you of some of the reasons the previous application was refused and the appeal dismissed. To quote, "Commercial heritage of Greenberfield Locks. The recreational use is in an appreciable rural setting. The qualities of this site would be significantly eroded under the proposal. As the site levels are noticeably higher than the canal, with land rising from Coates Lane, This proposal would heighten the sense of impingement on the setting of these designated heritage assets. Whilst landscaping may soften the edges of the proposal over time, the open appearance of the side would be reduced. The conclusion is that the benefits that arise would not outweigh the harm caused by the proposal. The proposal conflicts with the development plan, and there are no material considerations to outweigh this conflict. End of quote. These are just some of the words at the Inspectorate when dismissing the appeal, and in my view, none of these reasons have changed. The copy-paste outline plan, desktop surveys and quaintly photoshopped pictures of the site are a feeble attempt to mitigate the impact of such a development. Would anyone be prepared to purchase a property for hundreds of thousands of pounds with outstanding views and then allow a corridor of trees to grow in front of those houses, as depicted on their plan? I think those trees may never grow to maturity. I imagine that a draft email is already in existence, waiting for the send button to be pressed, which would apply to increase the number of houses considerably should this outline planning permission be granted. As was the previous application, this one is outside the Pendle development plan and encroaches into the green countryside. Does anyone in Barwick really want these houses in the area, or do we have to bow down to the developers every time? And they don't seem to care about the environment, the infrastructure or local residents. I implore you all to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ian? No. Thank you very much. So, Nigel Harris.
Thank you, Chairman. The previous speaker has said quite a lot of stuff that I would want to keep with. I will be brief. It's only 30 months ago since the planning permission was turned down on appeal. It was refused also twice by the parish council, twice by the Pendle council. So what's changed? All the heritage stuff is still there, and all the views and everything else will be completely spoiled. If this smaller development is accepted, it will be a Trojan horse. I mean, anybody in this room behind here will realise that once the application is if it is going to be passed, the developers who've got a lot to gain here will just go for more, and then they'll go for more until all the field is going to be built on. And the only people who are going to benefit are the farmer and the developers. It won't benefit Barnoldswick, and it certainly won't benefit the local people. I received a letter from Andrew Stevenson not long ago, saying that he'd been requesting the Pendle Council on numerous occasions to reduce the targets because because the targets have been reduced anyway by the government. So why are we hell-bent on developing on land that is so precious to the town? There are already ample supply of houses, can be shown by the prices of houses that are being sold in the area. If there was a shortage of houses, the cost of the housing in Barnoldswick and the surrounding area would be considerably higher. I understand also that there is also a planning application to be submitted to you guys on Barnsley Mill for 129 houses. How many houses does Barnoldswick really need? So therefore I would be against this application, and it would be it will spoil a beautiful part of the town, and certainly not wanted by the locals. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, Any questions for Nigel? No? Nigel, thank you very much. I will ask Mr Watson, I'll give him fair notice, to ask Mr Watson, when all the speakers have made the contributions, to explain as best he can about the housing numbers and what the ins and outs of that are. So I don't know whether we'll be any the wiser, but we'll hopefully do his best. The next speaker I've got is Sam Wellington Clark. You don't have to move very far.
No, I know, but I don't want everybody turning their backs.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. There will be repetition. Obviously, I can't scrub it off here as easily as I could with this piece of paper. Well, where does one begin with this proposal? Perhaps it's apt to quote a Burnley Football Club war cry, no, nay, never. Yet here we are, 3 refusals later, and less than a year since the appeal was rejected at national government level. Future Habitats Limited continue to knock on the door of our beloved Greenfield locks. Objections to destroying this area have been well documented over the last 2 years, and nothing has changed here, other than the fact Future Habitats have moved their goalposts, excuse me, reducing proposed property numbers again in an attempt to push this application through. As a resident, I could talk about the loss of right to natural light and to privacy, but we already know the Human Rights Act of 1988 holds little weight here. The only strong argument that's been available to us on previous occasions is that of heritage. But Future Habitats know the planning guidelines and how to flout them to satisfy their own ends. They will argue that this amended application will have no negative impact on the area in question and its heritage assets. Are we surely to believe that after money invested in acquiring land, employing the services of surveyors, designers and architects, submitting planning applications and fighting appeals, Future Habitats can recover these costs by building 30 houses? Once a firm foothold is made on that land, they will continue to develop to the point of their original application number of 100 plus dwellings in order to maximise their return potential. We can all consult the precious Pendle planning Bible, tick all the standard boxes, and in theory find no reason to refuse their application. But this area is green land. Developers can say that the field itself has no inherent natural beauty, ecological value, or agricultural purposes, that building here is merely urban infilling. In March 2018, the Ministry for Housing and Local Government emphasised that council should prioritise brownfield sites for redevelopment, protecting greenbelt to limit urban sprawl. They went as far as saying that once greenbelt has been identified, it is only the most exceptional of circumstances. Sorry. It's only in the most exceptional of circumstances that any type of development could be approved on this land. No one is looking at an application for a much needed school, health centre or other community building. This is a housing development in an area where there is no housing crisis and any need for affordable homes are already being addressed on brownfield sites within Balmosbury. The proposed development will extend beyond the official town boundary and be an infringement on an area of natural beauty enjoyed by a large community and by tourists. Simply stating,
the need for development is not a sound enough reason when councils develop their local plans. To recap, paragraph 145 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that the inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. We see no evidence of special circumstances here. How this application has found its way anywhere near the table again is staggering, and a planning system that allows this, after so many refusals, needs immediate review. Everyone is familiar with the phrase, 3 strikes and you're out. Well, Future Habitats Limited have already had those chances, so it's time to knock their application out of the ballpark and send them packing for good.
Dean.
Well, after what Sam said, I think I'm bound to repeat parts of that. But I don't intend to repeat all my objections because, as you are making tonight's decision, I can only assume you have read all the documents relating to this application. Admittedly, it's like wading through treacle, and it's certainly not bedtime reading. We're informed that each application must be treated on its own merits. Building 30 houses on agricultural greenfield land, which is outside the settlement boundary, and contrary to Pendle Core strategy, is definitely unacceptable and without merits. Especially when there are enough houses on the market locally, together with unoccupied properties and unbuilt planning permissions already in existence. Are you really wanting to be responsible for changing the dynamics of the town you love? The previous application was rejected by the Planning Inspectorate with the conclusion that, quote, the public benefits would not outweigh the less than substantial harm caused to the heritage assets. And moreover, the effect on landscape character and appearance would count against that proposal, end of quote. Why, therefore, are we still having to discuss a further application for this same field, this same heritage, and this same landscape? You are our democratically elected representatives, and as there has been no public support for acceptance, I expect you to vote to reject this third attempt at locals quite literally being bulldozed into something unacceptable, unwanted, and unjustifiable.
Gareth.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. Following these will be quite hard actually because it covered most of the things that I was going to say. But first of all, I mean, my objections for all the previous applications, including this one, are all on public record. So I don't want to repeat too much. But firstly, may I express my disbelief that we are here yet again to try and discuss the attempt to develop this heritage land at the end of Meadow Way, especially with the fact it's been rejected both at local and government level. Now, we all know Mr Darren Headley, who came to see this land, who's well qualified in making his report, and I think we need to take him seriously. Obviously, the main issues, which I'm not going to go over again, because it would seem to be pointless. But clearly, there is a firm-built edge to the town, and this proposal will substantially alter the physical attributes. In addition, I still feel it fails to comply with the Listed Buildings and Construction Areas Act of 1990, as well as the ENV1, LIV1 and ENV4 of Pendle Local Plan Part 1 Core Strategy. If you remember, there was a recent government white paper for planning for the right homes in the right place, in which the DLC proposed a 45% reduction in targets for Pendle for 298 down to 165. And contrary to what you were saying, Mr. Headley identified that there is already 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites available in this council area. So why the need for this unpopular and unnecessary housing project, I can't understand. And looking at the plans, 5 dwellings fall well outside the building line of current properties and fail to reflect the character of housings on the road. 2 of the proposed dwellings, townhouses, are being built on historic land drain and dangerously close to a land drain I committed to prevent my property flooding, as we're well aware it is a flooding area. They're also proposing to build them at the end of my particular driveway, and because of the height of these things, they will invade my privacy and light into my house as well. But it never ceases to amaze me how it appears acceptable for the planning committee to reason that neither lack of infrastructure or the amenities nor detrimental effect it will have on the environment is reason enough to reject this proposal. And if I'm not mistaken, this land has recently been reassessed as well as non-agricultural land. Yet quite strangely, the farmer manages to get a 2 quality harvests of this land each year, regularly grazing both cattle and sheep on it. So how come that the grading's come down? There are other issues in reflection to this proposed plans which will obviously have to be addressed, but that's something I'm going to have to look into later myself personally. So why has the council not informed all residents of these plans in this area when they sent round the letters? Were they afraid of another mass objection? You know, I really do hope that this time the council will ultimately support the local residents and community, and by seeing sense and reason reject this application once and for all.
Thank you. And finally, Faye.
Well, they've covered everything really as far as I'm concerned, but mine's short and sweet.
Faye, do you want to come and...
I think you can hear me, can't you? Can hear
Well,
me.
we can.
And everybody else.
It's a wider world. It's a webcast.
It's
I don't want to be on the webcast.
Okay.
With the combination of the canal-based historical assets, the open views of the drumlins and the highest point of the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, this area is what makes this location unique. Add to this a sunny day or evening and you have a spot that is truly magical. The addition of housing or trees to mask new housing will seriously detract, diminish and shade a location that causes visitors from around the world to stop, stare and comment. Just a short walk towards Barnoldswick from this point, the view is replaced by houses and a tree-lined section. I have never seen anyone on foot, on a cycle or a boat stop along this section to take in the view or comment on how wonderful the view of houses or trees are. It seems ironic that at one end of Greenfield Lane, trees that must have been stood for at least 100 years are cut down to pave the way for a housing development, whereas at this particular area we are speaking of, the development company are prepared to kindly plant trees, no doubt for our environment, to pave the way for access to a small development to begin with, which are all too aware of will become something far more sizable over time. Those of us here today are all more than aware that if permission was granted for this tree-lined request, it will only be a matter of time before the whole of this area is covered in houses and the true beauty of this spot is lost forever. Today this spot benefits many and encourages tourism to the area. Let's not allow it to be taken away and replaced by something that only benefits the few.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I'm going to invite Mr Watson to respond to the points that have been made and add any further supplementary information. I've got Councillor Tom Witt, I've got Councillor Ken Hartley, Councillor Jane Mills. Okay, so Mr Watson for a start.
So, just as Chairman, you said you wanted me to respond to housing numbers. It is covered in the report. Is there any specific, because it might be a long monologue if I go into that in many ways. Do you want me to cover any specific point, Chairman, on that?
Well, I think several of the speakers have referred, Nigel referred to targets, Gareth referred to housing numbers and the 5-year supply. So I think it's a case of the gist of where Pendle Council is in terms of those issues.
Chairman, very briefly, before I come on to 1 and 2 points, and I won't keep you for long because I think most of the points are covered in the report. Nationally, the government wants 300,000 houses to be built. The population projections are used for the government to work out how many houses are needed on a national basis. The last projections said that there were 216,000 needed nationally, and then there were some further population projections which would have brought that number lower. But there is and it's been mentioned over the last few days as well, so this isn't in any way political, even though the numbers based on population will come down, there's still a national target of 300,000 houses. So there will be policies to put in place that we go beyond what is needed on a population basis. So we have a target set after a public inquiry in front of an independent inspector of 298 houses to be delivered every year. The government have then a standard methodology which says what the starting point should be if you want to re-look at those figures. Now, the starting point is 146 units per year, and I won't go into the machinations of this, but you then have to look at a lot of other issues. Do you need affordable housing? What are your employment aspirations? What are underrepresented households? And then you add on those additions to come up with a number. We are currently looking at those, and we've got a draft report from some consultants called Litchfields, who give a range of options, but that will form the basis of review our housing numbers. As it stands though, it is 298, and that's what we have to base this on. Second issue is 5-year supply of land. There's a complicated process of assessing how many houses you've delivered based on 5 years worth of 298 times 5. Have you under-delivered on those? If you've under-delivered, you have to add on a 20% increase to those, and then you come up with a calculation. We publish this, you can look at it on the website, it's very complex, to say whether you have a 5-year supply of housing land or not. If you don't, I say you, that's every council across the country. If a council does not have a 5-year supply of land, then the National Planning Policy Framework, the National Planning Policy, says that you have to have a different way of assessing planning applications. You look at your local plan, and then you assess a development based on what the courts refer to as a tilted balance. That means it's not 49% in favour, 51 against, or the other way around. A development has to significantly and demonstrably, the harm of the development must significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits in order for that to be refused, except in certain circumstances. And one of the circumstances is if it affects designated, not undesignated, designated heritage assets, so listed buildings, conservation areas. This area is not a conservation area, but it has listed buildings in there. So, Chairman, unless you want me to go into it in more detail, we are in a position where we have an undersupply, a lack of a 5-year supply of housing. And basically what that means is if applications refused and we don't build, then that supply gets worse and worse, and the court said the worse your supply is, then the more weight you give to approving the application. We're at the upper end of that, so we're just under 5-year supply, but we are in an undersupply. So the test you have to look at, set out in the report, is does it significantly, demonstrably the impacts significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, except when you look at the heritage assets. So making that clear, because it is a point of law, and we were challenged, or an inspector was challenged at Salterford who got the law wrong. So if we get the law wrong, there is a chance of a judicial review, and there was a successful one at Salterford. So I think a lot of people glaze over with this, but it is absolutely fundamental that you need to get that right. Right, just a few points on this. One of the speakers said, I forgot which one, that you have to look at each case on its merits. You have to. You can't look at what may happen in the future, what's happened in the past. You have to look at this on its own individual planning merits. And it is a different, I'm not saying that you will find the impacts acceptable or unacceptable, that's for you to look at, but the impacts are different than previous schemes. You cannot look at this based on the other schemes. You can look at what the inspector said to give you some guidance about the impacts, and you will no doubt have read the inspector's report, but this is a different application. Point of law, it is not green belt, so you don't have appropriate or inappropriate development, it is green field, and that is legally a different thing, so don't consider this as green belt, because that is straight to the High Court and judicial review. Well, the brownfield first, I'm afraid a lot of misinformation out there about brownfield first developments. It is not brownfield first. We had, in our inquiry into our local plan, we did have a policy to say we expect developers to go for brownfield sites first. An inspector took that out and said that is not government policy. Okay, so you need to be clear. You can't base this to say go to brownfield first, because that is not government policy that we've got. Chairman, there are, in terms of benefits, a few people have said there are no benefits to this scheme. I understand the points, and I understand people making them, but it is a national position. The inspectors say that there are benefits from housing. You may not agree with that, but I'm advising you there are benefits, because you're supplying housing, you've got builders, you've got supply chain industry, etc. You cannot, and I would advise you not to say there are no benefits, and do not, and say that if in the balance you find there is a harm to a heritage asset, there are no benefits to this scheme, because I think you will be found wanting. The balance you put on that is entirely up to you. You may say there are benefits, but they don't outweigh the impact on the heritage asset. You might find the other way, but please don't say there are no benefits, because nationally it is recognised that housing does benefit society and the community. You may not agree with that. I'm just telling you what the inspectors will say. That's it, Chairman. I think that's just glancing over my notes. Just deal with this based on its merit. It is a reduced scheme. The developers, whether you think they're doing this for philanthropic reasons or malevolent reasons, have reduced it to try and accommodate the impacts. It's for you to decide whether that's they have or haven't.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watson. Just one further thing for the committee to bear in mind in discussing this. I think it was Gareth who mentioned the layout and the proximity of proposed dwellings to his property. The only thing in front of us is the principle of development, the outline and the access. The layout that was part of the plan submitted is an indicative scheme. It need not be the case that that is developed, so I think it would be wrong to base any decision on the layout which is given as an indication rather than what might be contained within a reserved matters application in due course. So I hope the committee will not make that one of the reasons, because that would be ruled out. So I've got councillors Tom Whip, Ken Hartley, Jane Mills, Mike Goulthorpe. So,
thank you, Chairman. I can agree with what has been mostly said. And I think that the proposed development would cause harm to the significance of the heritage assets in that area, and that harm is it outweighs any benefits that the scheme does have. As well as that, the natural setting of the landscape from that site would be stripped away with development, and it's because of these two reasons that I would like to move to refuse this application.
okay.
On those grounds, and I can go into detail.
Well, do you want to go into detail and then we've got that on the table?
Yep. The proposed development would cause harm to the significance of the heritage assets and their settings. Such harm would be contrary to section 66 of the planning, listed buildings and conservation areas Act 1990, and policies ENV1 and LIV1 of the Pendle Local Plan Part 1 Core Strategy. For the purposes of the National Planning Policy Framework, while such harm would be less than substantial, it would be sufficient to justify refusal of planning permission when weighed against the benefits of the proposed development under paragraph 134. The proposal would result in the unacceptable loss of a prominent greenfield site, which makes a significant contribution to the landscape character and quality of the area, and therefore would be contrary to policies ENV1 and LIV1 of the Pendle Local Plan Part 1 Core Strategy.
Thank you very much. Is there anything further?
That's everything, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hartley.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, can I make a public statement that whatever I say in this room tonight, I'm saying as Councillor Ken Hartley, and not in my otherwise alter ego as the Mayor of Pendle.
You want to sell any tickets for your show on Friday?
The reason being, if you like, that I shouldn't be bringing the mayoralty in dispute, and therefore I am not bringing the mayoralty into this room. I'm speaking as a councillor, that is all. I want to second Tom's motion to refuse this, and I think that there are some very, very good reasons for doing so, not the least of which is the heritage asset. Part of heritage is the natural asset too, and one of the big natural assets in this area is the drumlin field. And if you're actually going to build a house on drumlin field, which this site is, it's on the periphery of the drumlin field, and you're actually building on a drumlin if you want to interfere with this site, then you are impacting directly on the natural heritage asset of the region. We've already got, if you like, encroachment up to the edge of the drumlin field. I think that, certainly from my point of view, I'd want to protect what we've got left before we destroy it in its entirety. And so I'm tending to vote against it from that point of view. It's still encroaching into open countryside, and by no consideration, as far as I can see, can it be called infill. It's still expanding ribbon development along Skipton Road, and therefore it is, I agree with most other people here, it's totally in the wrong place. By Pendle standards, in terms of the quality of land across Pendle, this particular field is relatively high value, high quality pasture. And we have very, very little of that in Pendle. Most of it is low-grade farmland. But this is one of the higher grades of farmland that we have available within the borough. And it seems to me that where we do have some reasonable quality pasture, recognising the pressure that's going to be placed, through climate change or whatever, then I think that we ought to be preserving the better pasture that we have, rather than eroding it and even worsening, if you like, the average farmland grade across Pendle as a whole. I can't get out of my head that if the process that we were dealing with here wasn't a planning process but a freedom of information request, then a number of times that this application's come back with the same question would qualify to almost as a vexatious request. And like most of the members of the public here, we've spent many hours with councillors debating the pros and cons of this particular site. From my point of view, I don't see that anything at all has changed from the original application. It still impacts severely the heritage assets that we have around us. It severely impacts the very nature of not only this part of Barnholdsbury, but this part of Pendle as a whole. And it certainly, since it does run right up to the canal bank, separated only by the road, on this particular point, it doesn't mitigate any of the original reasons for refusal, and I still think that it is a significant impact that gives me the strength to stand up to persistent development applications and saying no. I don't see that enough has changed to make me change a view and a vote that I've previously expressed on this topic.
Thank you. Jane?
Thank you, Chair.
Project?
Project. So I'm not good at projecting, so just bear with me. Okay. So I was listening to what Matthew had to say, that there was no loss of local character and no encroachment onto open countryside. Well, I personally disagree with that. So presently, we have a beautiful pastoral setting with clusters of designated and non-designated heritage assets. The proposed development would intrude onto a sensitive setting of geographical and heritage importance. I've looked at a LiDAR image that was submitted in one of the reports, and that to me highlights my view of this. The proposed development site forms part of the surroundings in which the heritage assets sit. Now, David Menkins noted also that the Drumling setting, and that is very relevant to me. The sensitive area in which we are looking at has communal heritage value for both locals and visitors. A change in setting would be detrimental to users. Building on this piece of land would mean more of an urban experience for people visiting the area. The report states that there will be varying degrees of harm to the site and surroundings should the development take place. In fact, one clearly shows that there will be an increase in flood risk vulnerability. So my thinking is that the proposed development would cause significant harm to one of Barnholdswick's top attractions, and I have to go with what everybody else has been saying, that there's just going to be too much harm from this development taking harm.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. First, I'd like to compliment Tom on his grasp of the planning regulations. He's obviously done his homework.
Yeah.
Well done, Tom. I'm a simple sort of bloke, and listening to the residents and their issues they'd raised, I picked out 5 comments. I'm going to paraphrase them in a little bit, but first of all, it's outside the settlement boundary. Fact. It is a significant incursion into the countryside, whatever way you stack this up. It extends the built-up area into the landscape still further. And nonetheless, whatever you say about this, this development will bring dwellings nearer to our heritage assets. Fact. I like the bit about it being called a unique location. It is. We must keep it that way.
I suspect ultimately the decision will be out of our hands, because I dare say the applicants will go to appeal, and we'll go through that process once more. Could I just clarify with Mr Watson, Councillor Hartley suggested that the application could be considered to be vexatious in the sense of a repeated request. Would you just like to outline what the position is on that?
Chairman, when the application first came in, I took the decision not to accept it because I thought it was similar. Looking at the courts and what the court's decision, the courts very much give the benefit of the doubt to applicants if they make a genuine attempt to address the issues. Now, whether we agree that the issues have been addressed or not, the site's significantly different, and they have put evidence before the council. So, Chairman, whether it's vexatious, I wouldn't use those words. It is different, and it's different enough for me to have made that decision to have accepted the application.
Okay. And can I just check with the committee that we understand about the presence of the designated heritage assets, and that in terms of our 5-year housing land supply, or should I say our not having a demonstrable 5-year housing land supply, that we do not have to look at the tilted balance because that significant and demonstrable harm, because those designated heritage assets are there. So we're clear on that, yes? We're weighing up the balance, but we're not doing it to that degree because of the heritage asset presence. Yeah? Okay. Are there any further speakers? No? We have a proposal which was moved by Councillor Tom Whip, seconded by Councillor Ken Hartley. If anybody wants us to recap on that, we can do. But essentially, it is saying the harm to the heritage assets, less than substantial, but nevertheless still harm, and the impact on the character and landscape, and that those harms outweigh any benefit that the development might bring. Yeah? Okay. Can I see those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. The position is that the application has been refused. Mr Watson, hang on a minute. Mr Watson hasn't said that he wants us to tribute up to Policy and Resources Committee, so that is the decision of the local planning authority, and a decision notice will be issued by Mr Watson in due course to that effect. So thank you very much for all of the speakers. Thank you for coming along. I will pause the meeting just for a minute. If anybody wants to leave, you are welcome to stop the rest of it. But if you want to go now...
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
We're going to get the meeting back underway. If people want to chat, and they do so in the lobby, if we could just close the door behind us, that's great. Now then, we, besides Harry, who's a permanent presence, we have 3 people. Are you here for any particular item on the agenda? You're just stopping from interest.
Who's going to speak for that list?
Yes.
To say they want to build.
Yes, they did right at the very beginning.
Oh, I missed it.
Sorry. Well, he did speak and I made some notes.
Right, okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, back onto the agenda. We've dealt with item 5A. Item 5B is a report on the planning appeals that we've got, and we have got 3 outstanding appeals, which are Morrising at Earby, Victory Business Park in Bonalswick, and the land opposite the barn on Ben Lane in Bonalswick. So we are awaiting decisions on all those 3 appeals. I don't think there's any update on that.
Just the planning inspector incredibly slow at the moment, so I was giving out every time to.
Sorry.
Can we note the report?
Note the report, yeah. The next item is about enforcement action where there is legal action in process. Could I ask that we note that report? Thank you very much. Item 7 is the capital programme. The area committee has a relatively small pot of money which it can invest in different projects across West Craven, and we have one request for funding from an external organisation. Rosemary.
Yeah, and I'd move the bid that we give Craven South Village Hall the money for the plastic recycle vouchers.
Okay, so Culbrook and South Village Hall are asking for £425 for plastic picnic benches, and these are the recycled ones, which are quite environmentally responsible. Yeah. So it's moved that we approve that. Seconded. Those in favour, please show. Gary, did you want to speak?
No, I just wanted a second. I thought you were looking for a second.
Okay, I think,
No problem.
yeah, over there. Are there any further items on the capital programme? If not, can we note the rest of that report, please? Thank you. Item 8 is deferred. I'm not sure whether this is going to come back at the next meeting or not. Or whether it will be picked up by Policy and Resources when they consider the plan application. So I'm not quite sure which way that's going to go. Item 9, we've got a meeting with the Uniroyal Global Liaison group for the 10th of February, and we'll report the outcome of that back on the 3rd of March meeting of this committee. Can we note that? Yeah. Item 10 is consideration of the area committee structure, and members of the committee will be aware that in Pendle since 1995, I think it is, we've had 5 area committees, as well as the one here in West Craven. We have got one for Coleman District, one for Nelson, one for Briarfield and Reedley, and one covering Barrowford and Western parishes. as a consequence of the reduction in the number of councillors which will come following the all-out elections in May, the pattern of area committees needs to be examined. The boundary between Nelson and Briarfield will be confused because one of the councillor wards will span both Briarfield and Nelson. So there's an inevitability that the Briarfield and Reedley committee will become part of the Nelson committee. And there is a question mark, although I don't personally subscribe to it, to say that the Barrowford and Fence committee, Fence and Hyam committee, would be too small in number to actually be a viable committee. So the question is being asked as to what would happen to Barrowford and Western parishes encompassing Fence and Hyam, and there is a suggestion that that could be amalgamated, well it could in fact be amalgamated with any of the three other area committees, including our own. So I think the question before this area committee is, would we like to have Barrowford and Western parishes, including Fence and Hyam, included as part of this area committee? Would it make any sense? And do we want to lose our proud position as being the area committee representing the parts of Yorkshire that were brought into Pendle in 1974?
Well said, Chairman.
If that was a leading question, it
yes,
was.
It was.
Would somebody move something appropriate? Tom, are you going to move it?
Stairs we are.
I move that we stay as we are.
Yeah, okay.
Second.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Happy with that? Yeah. Right, now then. We're getting towards an exclusion of press and public, and we've got one further item, but then I'll go into the exclusion of press and public. We have a report on vacant houses, which sets out the position in numerical terms about how many vacant properties we've got over 2 years and over 6 months up to 2 years, and that is set against a general picture across the borough. I think we just need to remind the report writer that courts in this context has an E in it, so I'll be upbraiding Mr Lloyd when I next see him. But the report says that in Courts Ward we have 7 properties that have been vacant for over 2 years. In Craven Ward that we've got 18. In Earby Ward we have 9. And taking into account those properties have been empty for over 6 months, in total we've got 87 empty properties. Elsewhere in the report it does say that the level of empties has dropped very significantly. We used to have, I can't find it now, but we used to have over 2,000 long-term empty properties. That's now dropped in the borough to 758, and the percentage vacancy rate is now lower than the national and regional averages. So over the last 10 years there's been an excellent job of work done in bringing those empty properties well over 1,000 empty properties back into use, which is very good to do. Gary.
Can I just ask how these play with the housing figures when they're empty properties? Do they still count? Do they not count? Do they count when they brought back in? Do they count when they're being refurbished?
They count towards the overall housing
project. address.
So it counts towards the overall housing figure, but not, this is the oddity, not towards the 5-year supply.
When they brought back in,
yes.
Well, if we bring 1,000 back in, that's 1,000 in the supply. So that's, but they exclude it from the 5-year. The government tells us to do it in 2 different ways.
And the interesting thing, Gary, is that the challenge in the High Court by Sevens for the development at Salterford, it was that difference between whether they were treated as part of the 5-year housing land supply or not. The court, well, it didn't make a decision because the secretary, the solicitor to the Treasury conceded. So it was a very moot point about the vacant properties being brought back into use and what you could count them for and what you could not count them for. Any further questions on vacant houses? No? Peter?
Just a quick one. I take it that all the empty houses, the council tax is paid on the properties and is up to date.
I don't think that we can say that that's the case. Certainly the council tax is levied, whether arrears are building up or not, that might be the case. The properties that are empty for 2 years and over, they have to pay a premium, which is now
150%.
no, it's going up to double. So you know, the financial imperative for people who do have long-term empty properties is to get them reoccupied because it starts to cost them a packet. However, as we know, a lot of properties are very problematic in trying to resolve the issues, and it just amazes me that people can leave property empty for decades and they don't seem to mind that it's just money down the drain. But there you go. And we can't talk about specifics because of the general data protection regulations, but we all know where there are properties in those circumstances. Yeah, okay. Right, if we note in that report, the next item on the agenda is exclusion of press and public. Councillor Tomwick.
Chairman, I am slightly confused about why this is how it is, because there's no individuals named on these redacted papers, if they're redacted papers. It's just locations. And these locations, they're publicly accessible. You can go on Google Maps, you can click a location, oh, that's the address. And when they're not tied to a person, are they really personal information?
Yes.
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 And is that confirmed with someone who knows
Yes.
a lot?
Just take my word for it. The problem is that I think it was Westminster Council had a case against them for declaring, for publishing where empty properties were. and they were the subject of a significant fine under the General Data Protection Regulations. So we have wanted, and so a property address could reveal, could be linked to somebody, and we could be in breach of the law and subject to a whopping great fine. The items that I think we can take without excluding press and public are the ones on the Brindley Mews development, because that is a development of quite a large number of properties. The agencies involved with that are not individuals. We are talking about a housing association, we're talking about the county council, and the rules about revealing information about an individual do not apply in that circumstance. So I am not proposing to take the Brindley Mews development as a Part 2 item. And similarly, we are talking on item 14 in very general terms about vacant commercial properties. We are not identifying particular properties. We're talking about a problem. So I am not proposing to take that in Part 2. However, we will need to take the item on outstanding enforcements in Part 2, and we will need to take the environmental crime item in Part 2. Gary?
The GDPR has one general exception, it's where law enforcement is concerned. You are entitled to publish, I do believe.
Well, we will take advice on that, Gary.
Please.
I do accept law enforcement. I'm not sure that the civil actions that we're considering here.
Maybe it's not environmental crimes. Maybe
Yes.
it's nearly environmental crimes.
Okay. I think we'll take advice on that. For this evening, I'm going to play it safe.
Sure.
And so we'll take the two items that I've mentioned, which is item 13B, Brindley Mews, and the vacant commercial properties, and then we will exclude press and public. The webcast will then end at that point. So, can I take item 13B first? And we had a meeting with the County Council, Councillor Tom Whip, myself, Mr Watson, and the developers and Together Housing and their consultants. And there was a whole series of issues which we were concerned about, which was that the roads hadn't been made up to an adoptable standard. They hadn't provided street lighting that would be required, and they hadn't installed the necessary bollards to stop up part of a highway which should have been done so. On the whole, it was a very positive meeting, I think you'll agree,
Yeah.
Tom?
Very positive.
After Councillor Tom Whip's been raising this at every area committee since he became an elected councillor, we finally saw some light, and they did concede that they needed to carry out work. We understand they were due to come on site today to carry out a topographical survey, which is part of the process of showing what has been done and showing the as-built position. They do have quite a few hurdles to get over in terms of demonstrating to the County Council that the road has been made up to an adoptable standard. The one bit that we haven't achieved is the extent of the adoptable road on Applegarth, where that will only be up to the back street of the orchards rather than further up to the back street of George Street, which we had hoped to be, but that's not going to be the case. Mr Watson, is there anything further to add on that? No? Any further questions on that or comments?
Just to say,
Jennifer?
Yes, Mr Chairman, just to say that they have been down there
Yeah.
today.
And can we note that then?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Item 14, vacant commercial properties. It's just that we will have an update to a future meeting. I think we're going to note that. Yeah. In which case, we're now going to move into the private and confidential part of the meeting. Apologies for the people that we've got to kick out. Can I thank very much anybody that has been watching the webcast. You can comment on